I regret to inform you that this is not Motorsport 101 tonight. This is Motorsport 100.9. Welcome back to Motorsport 100.9. It's not quite as catchy. We'll still work on the name. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 565 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison, and it's time for part 2, the middle chapter of season preview season. And this time we're going from 4 wheels to 2 as we preview the 2025 MotoGP Dick Flat. Sorry, it's a season preview here on my sheet. I don't know how I could have possibly gotten those two things misconstrued. Not like testing didn't give us anything to go by. I'm your host, Ray Harrison, of course, and over the next 90 minutes or so, we'll wrap our heads around the best, the worst, and everything in between in MotoGP's 2024-25 off-season, make some predictions, and generally talk about the state of the sport in the field going into the biggest MotoGP season we've ever seen. More on that in a minute. Joining me as ever, we have Mr. RJ O'Connell. How's it going, sir?
Hello. I guess from testing, to paraphrase the late, great WCW legend Sean O'Hare, we're not telling you anything that you didn't already know.
Yeah, that kind of feels apt and appropriate, to be honest. I'm not going to lie to you. And also joining me is Mr. Cameron Buckley. How's it going, Cam?
I'd like to give us a little bit of a flavor from the Books of Sorrow from Destiny. You will never be what I am. Simulate me. Compute the death in the shape of my aerodynamics. Render my shadow on the stone of 10,000 graveyard Hondas. It will never be enough. We are screwed.
As
we as a society must all bow down to the altar of the Desmo.
As a man who's never played Destiny in his life, I had never heard this before, and yeah, that's remarkably fitting.
Yeah, we're hosed. We are not. You will learn nothing new from this podcast. That I can guarantee you.
Oh no! If we get ourselves a few drinks in, we could learn something new about ourselves.
Two-wheel? I don't know.
Tonight is not a night for self-reflection for me right now. Let me tell you. Of course, Cam Buckley and RJ O'Connell. I'm Dre Harrison. Please, you can find this real quick because I want to get straight into this time around. We are, of course, on good Twitters, respectively. That's Blue Sky, at Dre Harrison, bsky.social. RJ O'Connell is RJ O'Connell. C Buckley is C Buckley 917. Just take out the vowels, you'll find him. He's the guy that's too angry to die somewhere, essentially.
Oh, yeah, and the anger grows every day.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the exact inverse of Tesla's stock price right now.
Oof. Hiya.
Down and down.
Down and down. You can follow us on bad Twitter at motorsport_101 and on Instagram at motorsport101pod. If you're a fan, we're going to get the name just to 100.9 soon enough. Well, I'll get working on that in the interim. If you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101, where you could actually get a good chunk of this season preview for free. Well, not free, for the price of $1. It's basically the same thing.
It's a much better value than whatever you're paying for TNT Sports or Matt.
Exactly. It's literally 31 times cheaper. I fail to see what the problem is here. I think that's fantastic value for money, personally. I don't care how many World Superbikes highlight videos they're going to put up on their YouTube channel. I am giving you a better deal. So check that out if you haven't already. Patreon.com/motorsport101. I'll put in occasional written freebies in there on the cheap for just $1. $5 gets you early access to all of our episodes, and $10 gets you in the supporters club of our Discord server where you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as Kira, Jason, and Ghost Raptor are all doing right now. Thank you so much for listening and your support as ever for good people, and we hope you enjoy the show tonight. Also, check out the blog section for full season previews from me and a long list of notes on the MotoGP and IndyCar, and there'll be Formula One stuff as well coming up in the next week or so. Right, without further ado, right after this little jingle, we will talk MotoGP 2025.
Ooh.
So let's get that calendar out of the way and do a little bit of cleanup like we do.
Want me to do the honors?
Season previous. You took the last one. I'll take this one. It's only fair. Give your lungs a breather. The MotoGP 25 calendar has had. There's a lot of changes here for this year. First of all, I'll get the bad news out of the way. This is the biggest MotoGP calendar we've ever had. 22 rounds in all. Okay, technically we've not had a season more than 20 yet due to cancellations. If this calendar holds up, fun fact, it'll be the first time in 6 years a MotoGP calendar is finished as scheduled. Thanks, COVID. And the Kaimi ring, we hardly knew ye.
Arms of an angel, you weren't the Vietnamese Grand Prix.
Yeah, we had our own version in Finland. It was great. But the good news is that there are no triple headers. They have been scrapped. The teams complained last year that the triple header was too much of a workload and stress bearing on their members of staff. It's a tight-knit crew in the paddock. They were all pretty unified on this start, and the sport actually listened and said, okay, fair enough, no triple headers. And they stuck to their word on this one. So
it's
that's good.
Easy.
Yeah, like if only Formula 1 could take a page out of that book. No, MotoGP decided no triple headers. Now, as mentioned before, I mentioned this as well in the F1 season preview coming up in the next week or so. The month of Ramadan starts in a couple of days' time. Ramadan Mubarak to all those that are fasting and celebrating. Stay safe out there as ever. It starts from February 28th to March 30th. So Qatar, which is traditionally MotoGP season opener, and of course a majority Muslim country, has moved to April 13th. Thailand will be your season opener this weekend on March 2nd. And good news, folks, Argentina's back, and we are actually going this time. President Milei cut a deal to free up some money, and they'll be back on the calendar on March 16th.
And good news, it's not in meme coin.
It's not in meme coin either. Just don't invest in that. It's or don't look up the country's inflation rates. It never ends well. They are back with COTA, the Circuit of the Americas, on March 30th. As mentioned, Qatar is now round 4 on April 13th. Next up will be the French Grand Prix at Le Mans on April 27th. That's a new slot, a little bit earlier on that one, April 27th. Then the Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez on May 11th. Another new move. The British Grand Prix is now in May. Rather than its usual slot as the first round after the summer break in August, it is now going to be May 25th. I promise you, there will be rain. I was going to say,
do we have to break out #cancelled again? I hope not.
I hope not. It wouldn't be good for that track. But I'm telling you now, last week in May, it will piss somewhere during that weekend at Silverstone. The weather sucks around here that time of year. So yeah, good luck to them on that one. That is that is 2 weeks away, and we've got another new round in that slot. Aragon is now round 8 on June 8th. So that's also going to be an interesting move. They used to be in September. It's now in June. Not sure why that is, to be honest, but that is there. Next up, you got the Italian Grand Prix at Mugello on June 22nd. It's one half of the first doubleheader of the year. That doubles up with the Assen TT on June 29th. Back in the Sunday slot again, by the way, folks. It's not going to be that sad as the sport used to have. Then we go to the Saxon Ring on July 13th. That's also enough of a doubleheader because Brno, Czechia, is back on the MotoGP calendar.
I thought you were dead.
I got better.
Brno is back under new ownership, new resurfacing, and the Czechia is back on the calendar in July 20th. Really looking forward to that one. That will be the first round before a 4-week summer break. The sport returns on my birthday, August the 17th, at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. Next up, another new track. Allerton Park will make its FIA Grade 1 debut, hosting MotoGP on August 24th. hopefully for real this time. Apparently the homologation is going well over there in Hungary. I've got locals and David Emmers back me up on this one on Motor Matters. Yes, Hungary is happening. I know a lot of riders and fans are not keen on the layout, but it is going ahead. So that is definitely happening. Catalonia next. That's in a new slot in September the 7th, on a brand new 6-year contract. Probably is a make good for the extra effort it put in to host the Solidarity Grand Prix at the end of last year. It was ruled with a brand new 6-year extension. Then we have Misano on September 14th. Then we have the Japanese Grand Prix at Motegi on September 28th. That's going back to back with the Indonesian Grand Prix at Mandalika on October 5th. Then we take a week off. The flyaways have been split up. They're no longer triple headers, as I mentioned earlier. So they take a week off, and then they go to Australia for Phillip Island. Yes, Phillip Island. Yeah.
Oh, the best.
October 19th.
Nothing beats it.
Yeah, October 19th. That'll be followed up by Malaysia on October 26th. Back after a year away in hiatus, the Portuguese Grand Prix at Portimao is back as well on November the 9th. New slot for them. That's a fun one. And yeah, also means we have 5 races in the Iberian Peninsula again, which is kind of wild. And that'll be back to back with the season finale back at Valencia after the horrible earthquakes and flooding they had last year on November 16th. In case you're wondering, the Indian Grand Prix at Buddha is been demoted to a reserve due to arguments over promotional cash. So that's the calendar. It's loaded, 22 rounds, 5 in Spain and Portugal. Brno is back. Hungary is around. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. A lot of changes, a lot of stuff that's been moved around, which I think is very interesting. It's going to be weird because you've MotoGP, you kind of roughly know how the calendar's going to look year on year. This has been the most radical change it's seen in quite some time. So we'll see how this shakes out. A couple of business changes behind the scenes as well,
including today where we just announced that MotoGP has an American television deal. I know they love to cut this right below the line.
Indeed. MotoGP is coming to Fox.
In America. We're rebuilding Speed Channel, but kind of worse.
Yeah.
Much worse.
FS1 and 2 will get every Grand Prix and Sprint live, apart from their home race, which is weird. Cota's going to be on Fox Business.
Yeah, not free to air Fox. Not FS1, not FS2. Fox Business, the Fox News flavored CNBC. And if you are a NASCAR/IndyCar fan and know what getting kicked down to CNBC is like,
Oh, here you go.
I do not, for the life of me, understand this.
It's never going to get top billing or second billing.
I have a question.
Or third billing.
I have a question.
During the day of the weekend.
TNT Sports is about to have a sizable chunk of its sports inventory freed up in North America. Why not just put it up there? It's already on the WDBD library everywhere else.
We watched Inside the NBA promote it on their own programming last year. This feels like a huge missed opportunity to me, quite frankly. But I suspect maybe because Liberty can't influence this as much as they can because they still haven't actually claimed full ownership of the series yet. I warned people about this last year, that this deal was not going to be straightforward. And turns out I was correct because, the European Competition Commission has opened a full investigation as to whether the Liberty Media owning Formula One and MotoGP might be considered a monopoly in Europe.
You don't?
It is.
You don't say.
All I'm saying is, bitch, it might be. That will likely be settled in the middle of the year. And we'll have to await that decision. All I'm saying is, if you're Liberty, prepare to fight this one in the courts, because I really do not think this is going through. Good luck.
Put a pin.
Put a pin in it for now. That is a thing that's going to happen. We'll have to wait and see. Also, as a small side note, I don't think I put this in a Discord server. I'm going to say it here because I forgot to do so. We promised at the end of last year that MotoGP their sprint races would be free to wear in the UK. They will be, but they will no longer be live. There's been a bit of a walking back of the agreement between TNT Sports and Quest, their free-to-air channel. We are still getting the sprints, but they will be on a small tape delay. For example, this weekend in Thailand, the sprint race I think is going to be 8 a.m. UK time. You don't get it in the UK until 10. So for some stupid-ass reason, we're getting it 2 hours later than the rest of the world. What's the point? Honestly, it just seems redundant to me. So yeah, unfortunately, there was a walking back on that big agreement between MotoGP, Dorna, and TNT Sports in the UK, which is unfortunate. And of course, and it's worth facilitating this into the greater talk of, well, TNT Sports is now basically the home of bikes.
Yeah, they got it all.
They now have everything. MotoGP, World Superbikes, they got off British Eurosport, and all of motorless cycling, i.e. the Tour de France, and pretty much every major cycling event on the calendar is all under one roof. It's £31 a month. If you think that's worth it, then by all means pay that money. But in terms of growth in the UK, bike racing is in serious trouble. This includes, in my opinion, one of the best race series in the world, British Superbikes, which is only getting a quarter of its races on free-to-air TV this year. You're going to kill bike racing in this country. You are not going to gain new fans by doing this. This is a really, really stupid move as a British motorsport consumer, and it will do nothing to grow the sport in the UK.
Have you considered that line go up?
The line is not even going up for the Premier League anymore. And if the Premier League is not generating more money, how on earth are the rest of sports leagues are going to cope? Good luck to them. I sincerely wish them good luck, because the line will go down. If the line goes down for the Prem, it will go down for everyone else.
Oh, that's crazy. It feels like the Prem line can't stop going up. But I learned something today. Dre, tell me about some of these new technical rules.
There's not a huge amount of rule changes going into this year, but there is one big one that will come up for tiers A, B, and C on the concession system, i.e. everybody but Team Japan. We are now in an engine freeze. You are no longer allowed to develop your engine effective immediately until the end of this regulation set in 2026, unless you are in tier D. If you're in tier D for concessions, i.e. Honda and Yamaha, you are allowed to continue developing your engines despite the freeze on regulations, unless you move up in tier. More on that later. This may affect one manufacturer on this list for reasons which we'll get to. That's the only massive regulation change that we know about. A couple of things behind the scenes. Simon Crafar, we mentioned it before, is the new Chief Steward of MotoGP. We're retiring Freddie Spencer from his role. I will send him an honorary jar of honey in tribute.
Yes, Simon Crafar is now the honorary Beehive recipient going forward.
Beehive recipient.
Dear God, anytime that the Jack Miller quote of bloody stewards is applicable.
Yes, we will have to wait and see how that goes. All I will say to Simon is he's a very popular man. He's very well liked in the paddock. The broadcasters love him. The fans love him as an ex-driver who pulls no punches. Good luck. You're going to need it. Yeah, because we said the same thing about Freddie Spencer half a decade ago. Look how well that turned out for him. Yeah, good luck to him. There's murmurs going around as well that Moto3 could be replaced. This was credit to Simon Patterson of the Race for reporting this originally around December kind of time. But Moto3 might be replaced in 2027. It could be a single make series. They've even thrown out the idea potentially of production bikes.
So it'd still be called Moto3, right?
It'll still be called Moto 3, but they are trying to go towards 250cc cheaper engines. It could be one make depending on KTM's involvement, because obviously they are half the grid in Moto 3 essentially alongside Honda. It depends on how committed they are to motorsport going forward. Again, remember that it'll become very important later. And yeah, they haven't thrown out the possibility yet of maybe using something similar to the KTM RC390, a baby supersport bike of some kind, like what World Supersport was, over on the other Dorna-owned motorsport ladder. We'll have to wait and see. This is all allegedly in an attempt to cut costs. They reckon the costs of Moto 3 has gotten out of control in recent years, and the amount they're charging teams to compete is getting out of hand because it's a big development race between Honda and KTM, and development races often mean everybody ponies up more.
I see the work going up.
So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Now, Cameron Buckley, cover your ears because that's all the major changes. It's time to talk about
It's time for our 30 minutes of government-allotted Honda fan therapy. That's right. It's the first of our manufacturers, the first of our teams of the Japan Cup, the first of our teams of the D tier. Honda LCR, Johan Zarco returns on the Castrol sponsor number 5. Snopcat Chantra makes his series debut on the Idemitsu sponsor number 35. He was 10th last year in Moto 2. And then, of course, we have the Honda Works team. It's no longer Repsol Honda. It's HRC Castrol. It's Johan Mir and Luca Marini, hoping for better results than they had last year. And to be fair, it can't get much worse, right?
No, it's not really possible. I'm not going to repeat my rant because if I do, I'll break into tears and then leave the show. Just go back to our season review last year. Just skip to the Honda section. You actually see my eyes pop out of my skull. I mean, it didn't start off so well. I mean, it's an HRC Castrol livery that is kind of mid. You had those two entities to mash a livery together, and it came out mid. But weirdly, preseason testing didn't go so bad. It was like, I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't half bad either.
There were genuine signs of improvement here. Like, the big development move is that Honda has bought a new mass damper to testing. It's designed to give them some more grip, and it seemingly has.
Well, they were testing it for some of that. It's actually very visible because it looks basically like a giant box hanging out under the seat unit. The only problem with that for me is, they only have it 7 years after Ducati brought one. Good job, guys. Where's all that money been going? Besides Marc Marquez's wallet. Yeah, I mean, they kept throwing parts at the problem. And for the first time, I think in maybe 2.5 years, Johan Mir actually has a smile on his face getting off of the bike. That's a big improvement. Just be a better last. I think that's the goal here. And it looks like they might even be a little bit better than that. But a better last would be sweet.
Look, they were 21st and 22nd with the factory team in the standings last year. They were the worst of the full-timers. Johan Mir crashed 10 times in Grand Prix last year. Luca Marini had the opposite effect. He didn't crash, but he was painfully slow. Look, Mir was top 6 in Sepang, genuinely, on pace alone. Over a lap, Honda seems to have made some genuine progress. There is some speed in this bike now. That is clearly obvious. I mean, if it wasn't like Mir did it one day and that was it. This was all 3 days that Honda was in the top 8. There's something here. Their long-run pace still leaves a bit to be desired, as to be expected, but
it's not 2 seconds a lap plus like it was at times last year, which was just there were times at the end of stints last year where they were like flirting with not being able to qualify on the grid if you took those times versus the lead times. So not too bad is such a step from where they were this time last year, where it was very clear everyone in that team was reeling from Marc Marquez's departure. It like the first shoots of recovery are starting to come up through the cracks. There's still a long way to go.
Yeah, I think you summed it up best, Cam. Being a better last would be a big step forward for Honda in the grand scheme of things. If you're in the points on a regular basis, that's pretty good progress. Don't crash the bike. Learn from what you've got. Johan Zarco likely won't, because Zarco was genuinely very good last year, given the circumstances. He had a couple of top tens on merit for Honda, which was miraculous.
He was right there as well with Mir and testing, like consistently getting the bike, basically bottom half of the top 10. We'll also say,
exactly.
Consensus livery of the year. Sarko's Newcastle livery.
The Castle's gorgeous.
Yeah. How did the works team mess that up and the satellite team got it so right? And I understand that red is Honda's factory color, but it's just like you just took your Suzuka 8 Hours livery and splashed some Castrol decals on it.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning as well, because it's worth mentioning that, as I was about to point out in the chat as well, they've bolstered their probable wild cards, because remember, they're TD, so that means they will get 6 wild card appearances this year if they want to. They have Aleix Espargaro and Taka Nakagami in reserve in the back, helping to develop this thing. And if one thing you can say about Aleix Espargaro, he is a savant when it comes to developing motorcycles. He was
instrumental in Aprilia's ascension up the grid. Key figures.
He knows how to extract speed out of a bike, and that is an invaluable member of their team. They've updated with. They've also got Romano Albassanio in the back. That was the big off-season hire. He's got over 30 years of experience in Grand Prix motorcycle racing. Was Aprilia's head of aerodynamics. Big coup to bring him in as part of the development team as well. Ken Karachi is now working with the test team predominantly, but Romano Albassanio is there now supporting Honda from the top. Big hire, and it already looks like they're reaping the benefits of that, because like I said, this is a Honda that's been horrible, but for the first time I've seen since their real struggles a couple of years ago, the worst of their struggles a couple of years ago, there is a little bit of hope here, and that is worth mentioning, certainly.
Yeah, it's not all hopeless. A word for Somcat Chantra, the second Asia Talent Cup graduate to reach the MotoGP grid. It feels like the benchmark here is just be better than Hafiz Siren was a few years ago when he broke in.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Look, I mentioned it in my season preview. It's not nice when you're the second-rated Southeast Asian prospect to get into the top flight of the sport this year. We'll talk about the other one in a bit. Chantra was
the other one. That's worth saying. Should have been on this bike and decided, no, thank you. I will go somewhere else.
Exactly, which kind of says it all, really. It sucks when you're very clearly the backup option, as Raptor says in our chat, and this is true. Somkiat Chantra is a multiple Moto2 race winner. He won 2 races in Moto2. He is far from terrible as a bike rider. You don't fluke wins in Moto2. It's just he never hit the potential that I thought he could have as a rider when he was winning races.
He's a bit specialist in that way.
Yeah.
Like, he is good at very particular types of tracks, and not just Indonesia, but there's certain corners where he really
Thailand.
Motegi as well. Like if he can kind of adapt to a multi-tool rider in that sense, I think he'll start getting along with the bikes even better. But initially, I like all 4 Honda riders. The most critical thing, I think, for they're not in play for a championship. Let's be extremely clear right now.
Yeah, and they know
not
that
even
too.
necessarily for Japanese Cup, because we'll talk about Yamaha in a little bit. But if the 4 of them can just keep getting the bikes home, which it looks like is now much more doable now that the bike isn't trying to axe murder them every time they crack their right hand. 4 bikes getting home, more data to throw at the problem, and it seems like finally that data is starting to reach the road a little bit, because we talked about it a little bit in your piece, kind of previewing the season on M101.com. Well, they didn't have much rear chatter problems last year because the rear tire wasn't on the ground enough for it to have too much grip.
Yeah.
They're starting to get around that.
Yeah, the Honda was making all its time on the front tire.
It wasn't making any time on either tire, Dre.
Well, it was if you were Mark, and even then he was struggling with it. So, which kind of says it all. You broke Mark Marquez, which again, we could
metaphorically and physically.
Yeah, we could have another crying session at Cam's house to pull up with a big bar of chocolate if we wanted to, but I'm going to spare us all that.
No, instead you're just painting my house with our red paintballs now.
Yes, that works too. Let's go across the pond a little bit here for Japan, and let's go to Yamaha. It's a big change at Yamaha. There's been a lot going on here. The factory team is still the same, Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins on the number 42, but for the first time in a few years, they have two teams because they now have Pramac. The Prima Pramac racing team has moved over. They've adopted a lovely shade of blue and black to go alongside the purple. One of those liveries that have really grown on me, by the way. And they're now sponsored by Alpine, which get your jokes in there. Get your jokes in on that one.
Yo, no horsepower? No horsepower. Yeah.
Match made in heaven. I like to call this phase 2 of the reboot. Lynn Jarvis, in his final year as team boss at Yamaha last year, put the building blocks in place for Yamaha's future. They tied Fabio Quartararo down to a new 2-year contract. That was goal number 1. You tied him down. You had to get a second team on the grid. And yes, Yamaha probably had to overpay to do it, but they now have a second team with full factory support alongside, with 2 solid veterans in Jack Miller and Miguel Oliveira on those 2 Pramac bikes. And the big one, the inline 4 is dead. Well, it will be soon.
Pending. Time of death is yet to be confirmed. Well, how much should Yamaha overpay? Well, they're subsidizing Pramac as a team on track, basically.
Yeah, they are paying for their bikes, their riders' contracts. It is a 7-year commitment by Yamaha, and they've given Pramac a Moto2 team to help develop their next set of riders as well. Keep an eye out for that, by the way. They're
subsidizing 2 racing teams for this team to get them to take their bikes.
Yeah,
my God.
We got Tony Arbolino fronting a new Pramac Yamaha Moto2 team with Boscanoro chassis. Keep an eye on them in Moto2 this year. That might be the year Tony Arbolino finally wins the big one. We'll keep an eye on that. But this, Yamaha we were umming and ahhing about, they might have been the stars of the test, especially the one in Sepang, where Fabio Quartararo was genuinely top 5 fast across multiple days of that Sepang test. There is a lot of new bits on the M1. We're talking new frame, new swing arm, aero kit, a new version of the inline 4, probably the final iteration of that inline 4 as we know it. It could be. We'll have to wait and see on that one. More about that in a minute. But yeah, the new M1 Cam looks like it might be working.
I'll reiterate my point from Honda. Not too bad. Which is a marked improvement for both Japanese manufacturers. I mean, the biggest thing that's really kind of hurt the M1 is in the quest to try and mitigate some of the horsepower gap to Ducati, and in the Spec Electronics era, they've had chronic rear grip problems, basically going as far back as, God, right after Maverick Vinales went on that hot streak as soon as he got to Yamaha. Well, they then fell off a cliff and ebbed and flowed, and then ebbed down into basically the swamp about 2.5 years ago. And the sweet handling, the ripping corner speed was no longer the hallmark of the bike. And if a Yamaha doesn't have that, it doesn't have anything. Because they were just getting shot to pieces by anything with a V4 down the straight.
Aprilia is the handling bike now.
We'll see about that. It's the Ducati is the everything bagel of MotoGP. Point.
The Aprilia was the handling bike for low grip conditions. If a track is slippery, that's when Aprilia's aero makes them more effective. But again,
I just can't believe that Ducati's handling is anything more than good enough to get by because it does everything else so well.
Oh, it does everything well, but we have time to discuss Ducati. In fact, we only have time to discuss Ducati later on. But the biggest hallmark thus far in this preseason test has been this new M1, which is outside the engine pretty much brand new. All new geometry, a lot of different spots. A little bit of that ease of use and that ability to use it on the limit is back. And not so great over a lap still. The Yamahas rarely are. But you can use it over a stint and you can use it to generate really good corner speed. So they look legitimately fast. How that's going to be in combat, which has traditionally been a huge weak point of Yamaha in the modern age, we're going to have to wait and see. But when they're out alone, Fabio can get that up amongst the lower end of the GP24 Armada and the top end of the Aprilia.
Yeah, might do.
He can get amongst them, which is far better than where it was last year, where sometimes they were losing with Honda to the Japanese Cup.
Yeah, Fabio doesn't have to stress and strain anymore. Big year coming up for Alex Rins, I feel. And then you got the Pramacs.
Yeah.
Look, would they have been better off performance-wise if they stuck with Ducati? Yeah, unquestionably. But are you going to turn down free bikes? Absolutely not.
Are you going to turn down a portion of the GDP of Japan to run your racing team?
Yeah, this will keep Pramac afloat for years to come on the balance sheets. Look, Pramac was a Ducati customer for 20 years before this switch. But Ducati looked at Pramac like, you should be honored you get to use our bikes. Yamaha was like, we'll give you whatever the fuck you want. What's it going to take? And I've said before, my theory is the moment that Pramac knew at the end of last year that Jorge Martin was not going to stick around for 2025, there was no point in continuing in being a Ducati customer because they were never going to have a world championship contender on his level again. Martin was irreplaceable. Once Marc Marquez said, I'm not prepared to ride a Pramac, that was it. That should have been the final nail in the coffin. And that
I personally find it, Dre. I find it incredibly funny that we just burned all this potential, all this capital, all for Marc Marquez to end up on a year-old bike anyway.
More on that later. But, I mean, I'll say this, I completely agree with RJ. It's a contract year for Alex Rins. He needs a big season to stay on board with Yamaha because he's got two capable riders in that Pramac team that could easily take his seat next year. Plus, there could be a couple of names out there on the market, which we'll get to, which could also throw a cat amongst the pigeons. Jack Miller, this is the fourth different manufacturer he's ridden for. And look, Jack, I've kind of grown a bit more sympathetic towards Jack Miller in recent times because it looks like no one's been able to handle a new KTM out of the box, let alone Jack. So, yes, he wasn't as good as Brad Binder was. That's more than obvious. But this is another fresh start for him, and apparently he really likes that new Yamaha. He's taken to it very well.
It's good because I know both of you were really down on this signing.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't know the sheer scale of KTM's issues on track and behind the scenes at the time. More on them in a little bit, but
very shortly.
It feels like for Jack and very much for Alex Rins, this is the last throw of the dice. They need to have big years because as far as Rins, I mean, still reeling from that gargantuan crash that basically sent him out of Honda.
He still walks with a limp.
Visibly so. I mean, he didn't break his leg. He shattered his leg. You know how bad his crash was? Dorna never showed it. They showed anything and everything that might get clicks. They didn't show that one.
It has never been replayed, which for Dorna says something. He needs a big year. Jack Miller is Jack Miller. Miguel Oliveira is the sort of rider where I go, you are such a Goldilocks rider. You could be so good. It's just never worked out for Miggy on any factor.
Ultimate, why are you the way that you are, rider? Because when Miggy is good,
he's so good.
Rain God all day. You make the track wet, he's phenomenal.
He has multiple wins in the wet and the dry. He has 5 top flight wins. 5.
When he's bad, it's like you wonder how the good ever happened, because there's no middle ground. The ceiling is fastest rider on track.
I think a lot of the middle ground evaporated.
What are you doing?
A lot of the middle ground evaporated when he got hurt the last few years.
Yeah.
He has had a string of injuries which have not helped. But look, this is Miguel Oliveira's age 31 season.
That doesn't feel real.
He turned 30 in January. It's crazy.
Yeah, like this is his age 30 season. He's been in the top flight now for nearly a decade. And it's just never quite worked out for Miguel. And this is a guy that I've gushed about in juniors. He had one of the great Moto3 title comebacks. He nearly beat Danny Kent to that title in 2015 when he was in Moto3. He was an excellent Moto2 rider. He was half a shade behind Brad Binder, who would go on to win a title. And this is a guy that was trading punches with Francesco Bagnaia in Moto2. He's been a world championship runner-up in the lower categories twice. Like
you don't do that without being quality, right? I mean,
he's an excellent rider at his best, but the best is so thin. Last year was a walking example of that disastrous year. Was injured, fell out with Davide Brivio at Trackhouse, was booted out of that team for pennies on the dollar, but still had a sprint podium in Germany. He was second in that sprint race. Like, Oliveira at his best is as good as anybody.
Which after Kodo is one of not many bright points left for Aprilia on the year, top to bottom.
Right. So Yamaha's got a lot more tools in its arsenal. It's been prepared to write checks to get back up the grid. It's got genuine promise in its bike again for the first time in probably 3 years. And it's got a loaded roster. There's some good riders here, and Fabio Quartararo, we all know, is world class. He will make up for some of that qualifying shortcoming because he's one of the best qualifiers in the world anyway. So let's see what Yamaha can bring to the table.
This is Japan always comes back. It might take a while. It has taken a gargantuan amount of resources for these two entities to start recovering and start coming back up the grid, but they're starting to get the momentum behind them again.
One more key point before I move on. Yamaha is planning to debut its V4 engine at some point this season. If it doesn't, keep an eye on their scoreboard, because I've mentioned this earlier, we are in an engine freeze. Yamaha is exempt from that engine freeze for now. They recheck the concession system every 6 months. So they will do a check at midpoint in the season at a certain point. We don't know when exactly, but if Yamaha is at 40% of Ducati's point total by that point, they will be in Tier C. They will no longer be allowed to develop their engine, which means their V4 might not debut until the end of this regulation set due to that weird quirk in the rules.
It was a 1000cc.
So you're saying that Yamaha may be incentivized to tank here early this season unless they get their V4 on the track as early as possible?
In theory.
I'm going to be real with you. Anyone scoring 40% of Ducati's points this year as a manufacturer might be an achievement.
Yeah, you don't even need to try. You don't even need to trust the process. Man.
Rough math would, in my opinion, the rough math would be somewhere around 250 to 300 points. I don't think that will happen because that would require, in my opinion, roughly top sixes on a consistent basis as a pass score. I don't think Yamaha will be that good.
With at least 2 of their bikes.
Well, manufacturers only the top bike counts are manufacturers.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yes. I know.
Fabio would have to be top 6 every weekend, and I can't see him doing that. but it is worth keeping in the back of your head as a thought, is what I would say, because you never know. There could be some big results in there. You never quite know in MotoGP till you see it for real. So it is worth
noting as well that they also talked about like they're testing the V4 on the dyno. At some point it will get to the track, but they've also made the point they're only going to switch to the V4 if they're absolutely certain that it's going to be an improvement on the inline four. So I'm going to put them both on track and see where they go. Again, because the V4 is such a major architecture change on the bike, and Yamaha hasn't run a V4 in Grand Prix racing since they were two strokes.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a bit of a departure for them.
Yeah, but the way you lay it out,
too long to wait.
The way you lay it out, though, it's just like, why wouldn't you make this change?
It depends. It depends.
People have been begging for it for years.
It depends on what they can get out of it, and if it makes sense to do so before they might be subject to set engine freeze if they had a good enough season up to that point.
We shall see
next year as well.
And I got Aprilia.
Let's go across the Atlantic. Let's go to Italy for a quick stop with Aprilia.
Woohoo.
They were third in the manufacturers last year. And there's the small, unimportant matter of, the world champion rides for you.
Did ride for you.
Sort of.
Look, here's how it is as it's announced. Aprilia Racing is the reigning world champion Jorge Martin on the number 1 bike, and Marco Bezzecchi on the number 72, who's 12th in the standings. And it is Trackhouse Racing. Raul Fernandez is back. Ayagura, the Moto2 champion from last year, is moving up. But, Dre, we're not going to see Jorge Martin at this first race of the season this weekend, probably by the time you're listening to this podcast.
Yeah, to give you a quick explainer for those who didn't see the test, day 1 of the Sepang test we had back in the early parts of February, Jorge Martin put his bike through the gravel, made a rider error. He got back on track. He had a rear tire that was colder than usual because he ran through the gravel. Martin was a bit too overzealous with the throttle, trying to make amends for that. Had a huge high side that yanked him off the bike. On landing, he broke metacarpals and metatarsals in his hand and foot. He was out immediately for the test. He had to fly back to Italy to have emergency surgery on those 2 limbs to try and mount a full recovery for the opening round in Thailand. He missed the entire Sepang test as a result of that. He also missed all of the Buriram test, again, to give him the full chance of making a full recovery. It was announced 3 days ago, as we're recording this on the 26th, that while training to get back for this opening round in Thailand, Martin injured himself again, breaking a scaphoid in his other hand and wrist and breaking another bone in his foot. So he's had to go back to Italy for yet more surgery to fix those limbs. Martin is definitely out for Thailand and potentially more too. So yeah, you will not see Jorge Martin at the opening round this weekend at Buriram. They've already confirmed that Lorenzo Savadori, their test rider, will replace him, at least for the opener. And that kind of sums up Aprilia's off-season. It's been a chaotic bitch. Jorge Martin has had virtually no time on the bike outside of that brief test in Valencia. Sorry, Catalonia, I should say, at the end of the traditional end-of-season test at the end of the year. Marco Bezzecchi's been there. We'll get to Bez in a minute. And Trackhouse in its own right has had a bit of a messy off-season. There were suspicions about their status as a manufacturer because, well, they had a very quiet season launch. It was twinned in with the NASCAR team, and there was a startling lack of sponsors on that Trackhouse bike with their new blue and yellow paint scheme. Way to go, Davide Brivio. Very original of you to have a blue and yellow paint scheme. You've never done that anywhere else you've managed. Ever. Never. Etc.
We call it Trek Star.
Yes, we can call it that. And also their co-owner, Pitbull, has parted ways with Justin Marks and Trackhouse. We don't know what the reason was for that, and we don't know how it's going to affect Trackhouse going forward. It's all been kind of kept very quiet and very under wraps. So Pitbull is gone, and by all accounts, from what I've been told, Trackhouse Racing is Davide Brivio Racing in all but name. So
I mean, for Aprilia,
it's been ropey for Aprilia.
Yeah, they get the world champion, who Ducati seemingly did not want, because when Marc Marquez is on the open market, you go get Marc Marquez.
Mm-hmm.
And now it seems like the number one plate is going to do the Abe Simpson arrive and leave again, in and out of Aprilia Racing.
Yeah, hashtag defend the one is looking very ropey pretty much from day one. I mean, at best, he is going to be weeks behind everyone else on adapting to a new bike. At worst, I mean, that's a pretty severe wrist injury. That's a pretty severe foot injury. Could be affecting him well into the season. There's not a lot positive to go on here between that news and then Trackhouse showing up basically with little to no sponsors and losing one of their main backers.
Where do we start on this? This is just, it's chaos. That's the thing about Aprilia. Aprilia never does anything in MotoGP quietly. Ever.
No, it's always... the only thing quiet was their form for most of last year when they were just smack dab in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
Aprilia is the kind of manufacturer that's going to stumble into their wife's house drunk and scream, "Honey, I blew all the mortgage on crypto again."
Oh. And then they'll get bailed out because crypto will have a short-term burst, and then he'll sell and he'll only lose about 10 grand.
We're all not for your life, honey.
It's all right. KTM doesn't even have the money to blow on
crypto. We're going to send the kids through college. Just you wait.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you lose Martin basically day one. The bike looks fine.
Looks quick.
Problem is, it looks quick. The problem is it doesn't look any quicker than it did last year relative to the big bad red menace out in front.
I'll give him this. Marco Bezzecchi has been excellent in testing. One of the, quite possibly outside of Marc Marquez, the most impressive rider who's on a new team this year. He looks like 2023 Bez. And 2023 Bez was a bazooka. That was a man who won multiple Grand Prix, was third in the championship, and was a genuine contender 3/4 of the way through the year.
That's why we had us asking, why not Bez?
Why not Bez? And then 2024.
Beautifully in sync there, boys. Beautifully in sync.
Same brain cell. Mine are fighting right now. But yeah, Bez looked fantastic. Set the fastest lap time that an RSGP has ever done around Sepang. And that's worth something, like faster than they qualified, faster than they raced last year, and fast over the long runs. But again, this is another year of, well, okay, you have perhaps the best aero in the entire grid. The engine is starting to get there. But how do you make inroads on the final boss? And, well, they're basically fighting Mizar from Jet Force Gemini. It's going fine right up until the point where you die horribly over and over.
Busting out Jet Force Gemini references in big 2025. Connoisseur's choice.
The year of our Luigi 2025 is just as good a time as any.
I was going to go for the Dr. Wily second health bar myself, but you know what? That works too. Fair enough. But I mean, yeah, Bez has been sensational in testing. It's given me a little bit of reassurance about Aprilia overall. That, hey, if Bez is quick on this thing, there's no reason why Jorge Martin can't be fast on this thing. Whenever he fully recovers. I really hope it's not a situation like Morbidelli last year. Obviously, Morbidelli's off-season injury last year was far more severe. But I mean, in the context of Morbidelli openly said himself, it wasn't really until June, around Mugello sort of time, where he really felt comfortable on the GP24 for the first time last year. I hope it's not like that, because if that's the case, then you can pencil Martin out of a title defense right here and now, because he's not going to have that luxury of being able to come back.
I think if that title defense is done with the number of races he's going to miss, he's going to have to go on a winning streak against a manufacturer that looks impervious going into 2025.
Yeah. And then you've got Trackhouse on the other side of the fence. I'm going to say it. I'm fed up of Raul Fernandez. I want to see more from this dude. There is a... I cannot stress this enough. 3 years ago, Raul Fernandez had the greatest rookie Moto2 season of all time. Had 7 wins in that Moto2 season. Probably should have won the Moto2 title that year against Remy Gardner. That was a year where KTM destroyed the field in Moto2. They won the team's title in September. They destroyed Worlds. We've not seen that rider in MotoGP yet. I know he never really wanted to be at KTM, and it just did not work for him over there. This is now year 4. He is 25 years old. Where is the upside that we saw from him in Moto2?
Somehow, on both sides of that equation, on Fernandez and Remy Gardner, both of those careers have basically fizzled to an endpoint.
Yeah, Remy Gardner's now a World Superbike's midfielder, stuck with a middle-of-the-road Yamaha, and Raul Fernandez, this feels like the last chance. You are now spearheading this Trackhouse team. Davide Brivio has believed in you deeply to the point where he was building the team around you last year over Miguel Oliveira, in my opinion, incorrectly doing that. You haven't got an excuse this year.
And you know what's crazy? He's only a few months older, just 3 months older, than their brand new rookie rider, Agura. Now, obviously, riders age differently, and Agura's had a pretty long and winding road to get here to MotoGP, let's just say.
You could say that. Honda prospect in waiting for years, right up until the point where he said, no thanks, I'll go somewhere else for my dinner. And he's ended up here. The Agura surprise no longer. It is the Agura expectation.
He's gone pretty well in testing so far. Had a small crash at the Barcelona test, but besides that, he's been fine. The good news is there's little expectation, which is good. I just hope he just eases himself in and finally, because this kid is an immensely consistent, damn solid rider. He won his Moto2 title by outpointing the field into oblivion and mounting sensational comebacks of excellent race pace in Moto2. If he can bring some of that to MotoGP, he'll be absolutely fine. Like I just don't think Trackhouse are there as a serious organization yet. I know Davide Brivio has got a reputation for being an outstanding team boss. He needs time to make this work with Trackhouse, and it's not there yet.
How many iterations of SRT/RNS/Trackhouse are we going to go? Money problems? Organizational problems?
There's rumblings they're running a golf livery for the opening round in Thailand, so they might have found at least a short-term sponsor, which would be nice.
They need stability, though. But you need stability at this level.
It just feels, and I'm not even American saying this, it annoys me that we're talking about Trackhouse was meant to be the breath of fresh air for MotoGP, and while their social media game is solid, they now just feel like another team. And that is kind of sad that they were going to lean into the Americana of it, and now it's Davide Brivio racing. It's not the same.
Anything like, instead of the breath of fresh air, it's almost turning into like another distillation of everything wrong here, like the last iteration of this team was, where they took the funny money, and that funny money basically killed the team.
You know what it is? It feels like Suzuki without the Suzuki. Because the guy at the head of the project is there, running the show. There's nothing inherently wrong with that.
No, there isn't. But at what point do you expect a return on that investment? There's only year 2. It's still early days. I'm not saying we need results here. but Trackhouse's first year had them 9th in the team standings. They were the worst of what I like to call the regular teams that weren't Honda.
The Italian Cup, as it were.
Yeah, it wasn't great. They need more, and I would like to see a bit more from them going forward.
Yeah. What I will say is that, other entities wish that they could have such like crises. Isn't that right?
Are you referring to KTM here?
I'm lobbing it up for you, and you, Blake Griffin, need to hammer
Ryan
down.
Eric King's fluttering heartstrings.
It's that was the Luka Doncic crossfield pass. I am LeBron collecting that hoop and dunking it down on KTM. Suck it, Mavericks. Anyway, this was. Let's talk about KTM now. For those that have been keeping up with M101, you probably already know a lot of this, but some of the situation has changed. We'll talk about their riders and teams in a minute, but KTM is still kind of riddled with some uncertainty. The good news, it turns out you weren't quite that badly in debt. You were 2.3 billion in the can, not 2.9. Thank heavens.
It's what?
I know.
God, I still can't comprehend that amount of money.
Yeah, it's not as bad as we were hoping. Other good news. As of a couple of days ago, the Austrian courts have approved their bailout plan with their creditors, which means KTM is safe for now, which is
and they
good.
don't even have to sell to BMW, as rumored.
Nah,
BMW ain't have the capital either with the way things are going for them in China.
I was going to say, that story was largely cap. You may have seen it advertised that BMW were rumored to maybe buy KTM and take it out of Austria. That was never really on. Apparently, a KTM insider babbled about it to put pressure on the Austrian courts to take the bailout, basically. They were using BMW essentially as leverage, just to shit some people up. But there's a couple of bits of uncertainty in this. Allegedly, KTM has raised new financing through other anonymous backers that will help them pay off a lot of this money. The problem is they've now got to pay it off in 2 months rather than 2 years because they did a deal with a US hedge fund to buy up a lot of their debt. But the Americans were like, what do you mean you're only paying off 30% of this debt? That's not how we do business around here, sir. So it also means KTM are having to cut 1,600 jobs, which is also deeply unfortunate, and my condolences to anyone affected by that. It's horrible to hear that so many people have been put out of work. It also led to a development freeze at KTM. They didn't touch their MotoGP bikes for 3 months while this financial mess was being settled.
Because there's no sense of developing the bike if the bike's not going to race.
And they didn't know where the money was coming from. And it got so extreme that KTM didn't even send out their press officer to Buriram for the second test in fear that one of their riders might say something that put the team in disrepute. So their riders couldn't give feedback on their second test to the media. Don't tell Simon Patterson, he's still fuming about it on Blue Sky. Good luck with that. Now, for those who may have missed it, this is a loaded 4-rider fleet. Yeah. Brad Binder is joined by Pedro Acosta on the factory team, and he finally gets his 37 back. Isn't that nice? Augusto Fernandez, we hardly knew ye. Don't worry, folks, he's not dead. He's just Yamaha's backup rider now. He's taking Jonathan Ray's place next time out in World Superbikes 2. Get well soon, Johnny. While also on the tech-free side of the garage, we now have Maverick Vinales and Enea Bastianini, arguably 2 of the 3 best riders that were on the board last year in free agency.
That should be a factory lineup today.
Well, Bastianini
was 4th. Yeah, I mean, Bastianini was 4th in the championship last year and won multiple races. I mean, Maverick Vinales made history last year as the first man in the MotoGP era to win with 3 different manufacturers.
He was also the only person to win a Grand Prix that wasn't riding red.
Like, could you imagine if Honda and Yamaha didn't stink lately? Like, that would be like a world championship lineup for either of these two. But they're in a satellite team.
Maverick's already been there and done that with one of those. I don't know if they necessarily want it back.
Hey,
However,
the Hardy Boys just came
effectively-
back to WWE for like the 12th time. Anything's possible.
You posted that tweet that Matt Hardy is now 50 years old, and I almost had a heart attack reading it.
Yeah.
You fuck.
But I mean, it is basically two factory teams. Tech 3 are treated equals with the factory KTMs. They're all painted the same now, so good luck telling them apart on track.
Yeah,
And
have fun with
yet
that.
I find everything but the rider lineup is just on fire.
Okay, what do you don't like here? Other than, the obvious, the big specter looming around KTM.
What I like is Pedro Acosta still looks extremely fast.
Chewy.
Acosta was amongst the quickest in long runs, but it did come with a catch. Yes, he was incredibly fast, but KTM had multiple pictures of them shredding their rear tires. Their tire wear looks horrendous this year, which is going to be a problem.
Gee, it's almost like that's been an issue with the KTM. How many years in a row? Why? That's
I don't know. I thought the carbon fiber chassis would fix all these problems.
No, and again, KTM with the same old bugbear of, well, if you ride it like a jackass, you can get a lap time out of it. But how does that work over a race distance? Well, ask Pedro Acosta's shoulders last year. The man had the most crashes in the field. This is an exceptional rider lineup, and yet through everything they have thrown at this program up into the financial problems and the development freeze, they are no closer. They got much the same problem with Aprilia. If anything, it seems they've actually fallen further away, because whereas last year you had a big step between all of the Ducatis running, this year they will all be running the Destroyer of Worlds. And I mean, if they haven't made any real inroads, what are they going to do?
You're right. It is I've said it before. Maverick Vinales is arguably the weakest rider in this lineup, and he has 10 MotoGP top flight victories with 3 different manufacturers. This is 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th in last year's championship. The only 3 dudes better than them were arguably, if not almost certainly, the 3 best bike riders on the planet today.
Wow.
And the KTM got the best team it could possibly get. It's got an arguably generational talent in Pedro Acosta, ready to be fully unleashed. And we just don't know how good they are. Like, we really just do not know. Like, KTM is the biggest wild card here. I think what's going to happen here is that Pedro Acosta will be hanging around top 5s and podiums again like he was last year. But I also think he's going to be a boom or bust rider. I think there's going to be a lot of crashes, but there's going to be a lot of sliding around. There's going to be a lot of late race struggles because of the lack of rear grip on that KTM. We've all seen Brad Binder make shapes on this KTM for many a year, and I think that's what's going to happen again here. And apparently Bastianini is not happy with KTM across the board, from the bike to the fact that he had to sack his agent in the off-season because he felt like he'd been done dirty, not knowing what KTM's financial difficulties were, and that they may have left money on the table by signing the deal with KTM. So the morale is not great in that camp. Apparently Maverick was a bit of a shot in the arm on the final day because he found a bit of pace in short runs, but Maverick's always been quick over on it. That's not a surprise to anybody.
I was going to say, when Maverick Vinales is switched on, he's still a top 5 rider in this world, and I don't know if he's 5. The problem is keeping him engaged the whole time. And there's just so much just gestures wildly around KTM as a brand, as a racing team. How does anyone in that team get their head down and actually go racing when all this shit is going on around them? Well, we saw it late last year. They really didn't. They kind of just spun their wheels all year, literally and figuratively, with all the rear chatter that the bike has had. And we are now going into a development phase. Well, they just had to pause development on the bike for 2 months. That is as unideal a situation as you can get. And because of the development freeze, we don't know if they're really going to be able to fix it unless the bottom just completely falls out. And frankly, if the bottom completely falls out, there's probably a bigger chance that the program gets folded, given the company's financial situation.
Or at least sold to the highest bidder. Because if Pit Bear has been very confident that at the bare minimum there has been a lot of interest in potentially buying the racing division from KTM and off spinning that part of the company while they try and figure out how to pay back their creditors. But I'm in full agreement with Cam. We just don't know what KTM is going to be. It is all over the place. There is at least with Aprilia, Bez gave me some assurances. Like, they will almost certainly be quick. Like, with KTM, I don't know what they're going to be. And I don't think it's going to be great.
But if that's the case, how many of these guys are going to be on a KTM come this time next year?
Well, the majority of them are on 2-year deals because Brad Binder's off sequence. He signed a 3-year
It's a very deliberate decision by him and his team to stay off sequence. He's been off sequence pretty much his whole time in MotoGP.
He's only signed 3-year deals because Binder likes having guaranteed money, which is completely reasonable for a man who came into the top flight a little bit late.
It's a smart move given the situation that entity is in right now.
Yeah, run me my money, etc. Here's the thing. Pedro Acosta apparently has already started sniffing around in case KTM's bottom completely falls out at the end of the year. I'll say this here. If I'm proven right on this, I'm going to gloat in everybody's face and make it everybody's problem. Do not be fully surprised if Pedro Acosta is on a yellow bike next year. You heard it here first.
Interesting.
I think there is an above 0% chance Pedro Acosta will ride for VR46 next year. And I'll tell you why as I get into the Ducati section next.
We made it.
Because welcome to the motherload. It's one of those things where, and I think RJ will appreciate this opening line of my Ducati season preview section here when I wrote on the side where I go, Ducati is just hitting endless mode on a successful Bellacro run. How do you improve upon borderline perfection after winning 19 out of 20 Grand Prix and 96% of all available points in 2024? Addition by subtraction. In American sports language, Ducati traded Nea Bastianini, Jorge Martin, and Pramac for the right to sign Marc Marquez to the brand.
Good trade.
Necessary? Probably not. Worth it? Absolutely. How else are you going to declare anti-11?
Not with a galaxy of thinking matter could you encompass me, Ducati to everyone. Well, how do you improve on perfection? You can't. You just keep last year's bike.
Yeah, that's been the big story.
Was better in some ways and worse in others. And at the end of the day, when you have Motorsport 101's Racing Vehicle of the Year, well, you might as well throw a fresh coat of paint on it, re-rack them, and start again.
Yes, essentially, when Ducati brought their 2025 bike and engine to the Sepang test in February, while it was a little bit quicker in a straight line in terms of acceleration and top end grunt, it did apparently hold them back in terms of engine braking and corner entry. And if you ask Pecco Bagnaia, this is a man who made all his speed as a MotoGP rider on engine braking and corner entry.
Well, and as the great Matt Oxley has talked about, you spend about 30% of a lap braking on a MotoGP bike. So, in their words, bike's a little bit less. The 25 engine was less cooperative on the way into the corner, whereas the GP24 was a very benign bike on corner entry, very easy to use. The 25 was less so. And so they were gaining a little down the straights and losing all of that and then a little more on the entry and then getting the bike into the corner. Well, who do they have tipping those bikes into corners? Just perhaps the two greatest corner entry riders ever. And Pecco Bagnaia and Marc Marquez. I think they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, it was apparently the rider's call, and both Bagnaia and Marquez agreed, let's go back to the comfortable 24 engine, and that's what they've elected to do. There are tweaks to the chassis and swing arm and other places, but the press nickname has called this bike the Ducati GP 24.9.
A couple odds and ends went into the motor, but fundamentally, the frozen stuff is GP24. The other bits and pieces, stuff like the flywheel, are adjusted a little bit, just to give them a little extra edge. I mean, it's not like they scored. Let me get my abacus out here. 96% of available points in 2024.
Yeah, it turns out it is very hard to improve upon the perfection, as we said earlier. And we, like, for any other factory, tossing an entire engine in the trash receptor would normally be seen as a terrible, no good off-season.
That's terrible. That's a bad idea.
But as Matt Oxley, the Motorsport magazine savant, said, quote, "It's all very ominous for the opposition. Ducati engineers could probably spend the next 3 weeks drinking beer on Bali and still smoke the rest of the field. It just doesn't matter."
My favorite line from all of preseason from any publication, Matt, never change, please.
Yeah.
Well, if he smokes too much hookah, he might get traded from the Dallas Mavericks.
Well, look, no one is incompetent as Nico Harrison works in Bologna.
Can I just say, Dre, congratulations for not being the most hated Harrison in the city of Dallas. And you've never been.
Never will be.
What a tremendous achievement. Like, it's great when they had the first Maverick Lakers game a couple nights ago, and the crowd is openly chanting "Thank you, Nico," off the back of a Luka triple double. Yeah, that was a thing.
Do we want to segue to another?
It's so funny.
Do we want to segue to another basketball analogy and talk about the other Cavaliers, aka the 146 Grassini?
Well, you see, we've put them all on that LeBron James $2 million a year fitness regimen because, well, you get a GP24 and you get a GP24. Everyone gets a GP24 now.
Yes, apart from Fabio Di Giannantonio, who will get the same support as the factory team. He'll be on a 24.9, essentially. But yes, we got at the VR46 team, we have Fabio Di Giannantonio keeping his spot on the 49 bike, and Franco Morbidelli has made the move over onto the 21. He's only on a 1-year contract, hence why I made the Pedro Acosta comments earlier. He's in a contract year this year.
Last roll of the dice for Franco.
It feels like it. I don't think his season was anywhere near as bad as some suggested last year. He was in the top 10. It wasn't a bad year by any stretch. But just stay healthy and ride well, Franco. You can do this, I promise.
The good news for him is that, well, he's going from a GP24 with full factory support to a GP24. He's not actually changing models because he was a same bike last year. So the continuity he was denied by his preseason crash last year and having to adapt to the bike, well, now he gets by sticking with the same basic mechanical package this year. Mm-hmm. Please, don't let it go out sad.
That would be nice.
We've seen what this man can do when he was healthy. Championship runner-up. It's been a long time since those days.
And I would like to see what Fabio Di Giannantonio can do with full factory support. This is a man who at his very best beat Pecco Bagnaia clean as a whistle in Qatar back in 2023.
Dead rider walking for that race. And then now, 2 years later, full factory supported Ducati.
He's earned it. Yeah, that's for damn sure. He's really turned it around. Proved it wasn't just a Frankie Carchecchi fluke last year, even with Grassini. Went to another Ducati team, was still in the top 10. Would have ranked a little higher if it wasn't for the separated shoulder he suffered mid-season via injury. Hopefully, a clean,
not dislocated, separated. Big difference. Much worse.
Yeah, I had to get the whole thing reconstructed with 2 rounds to go at the end of last year. Hopefully a full, clean bit of health will do him some good. Grassini has dumped some red, added some silver, and added a sketchy sponsor What's not to love?
More funny money in my top flight motorsport.
Not funny money.
Perfect.
Bookies money.
It's very funny money.
Oh yeah, well, it's a different kind of funny money. Yeah,
it's just shady gambling sponsor. Does not have the only claim to the funny money title.
True, absolutely. But they've got Alex Marquez, who's still there on the 73 bike, now on a GP24, and one of the fastest dudes in all of testing, especially in Japan. He loves
this
that.
This is where I wish Ryan was on the show with us right now.
Yeah, if we ran to the championship at Sepang, pencil that man in to sweep the season.
Oh yeah, that man's quick as hell, and he's got a new rookie alongside him. He's got a new rookie alongside him on the 54. Fermin Aldeguer moves up from Moto2. He was fifth in the championship last year. A guy that had multiple Moto2 victories under his name in the last year and change. A guy that was looking like he could be a real go-getter in MotoGP. Not so sure about that after a very sketchy 2024 Moto2 campaign where his form was about as erratic as anybody's.
I remember heading out of 23 that people were lining up around the block to try and sign this dude.
Yeah,
he finished 23.
His agent put a €1 million ransom on his head to buy him out of his contract, and no one bit on it. They wanted to wait, and apparently Ducati were like, shh. Here's a 4-year contract in the off-season in 2024. You're ours now because we think you might be a stud. We have to wait and see on this one.
Yeah, Aldeguer, when he's hot, he's hotter than fish grease. He finished 2023 like grease lightning. But 2024, again, when he was good, he was incredible. When he was bad, it was extremely rough. Mm-hmm. The good news is he's got long-term commitment from Ducati. He's got effectively current equipment, and he goes to Gresini and goes to Marc Marquez's spot where that team and that staff worked wonders last year.
Franco his crew chief.
He has as good a platform as any to shine. I have very great expectations of Aldeguer this year because with everything around him, there is no excuse. He's got all the pieces.
There's no reason why he can't be top 6 in the championship this year. No reason.
And that kind of, goes into, before we get to the factory team, because come on, that's what you're all here for. I mean, who wouldn't be? This bolsters Ducati's shots at sweeping the season heavily because you now have 2 more full-blown GP24s on the grid.
Ducati might have just raised their floor even higher.
You just gave everyone who wasn't on one of those bikes last year, basically as a matter of principle, 0.3 a lap in an easier bike to ride.
Hey, if you like single manufacturer hegemony and MotoGP last year, here's more of it.
But
they're trying to reenact their Volkswagen Group stablemate from the 80s.
Nobody's perfect, but let's be real here. You're not here for any of those 4. You're here for the factory team. We are talking 8 Premier Class World Championships, a combined 91 pole positions and 90 Grand Prix victories. On the 63, Francesco Bagnaia, last year's championship runner-up, and on the 93, in red, which still takes some getting used to.
He was in the other red for a long, long time.
Now he was in bright fucking red. If the Barces was anything to go by. Number 93 on the track, number 1 in your hearts, Marc Marquez, the 6-time Premier Class World Champion. This is it. As I've called them on socials, I've called them the Redeem Team. They're not the Dream Team because you lost the title last year. You lost to Jorge Martin. You were beaten straight up. This is the Redeem Team.
Why are you the way that you are, Claxon? I call it the death lineup. Just upgraded. You've done a light upgrade to last year's crushingly dominant bike, easily the best racing motorcycle we've seen since at least 2002, maybe even better. And you went out and you got, Marc Marquez, a few championships, a lot of wins, Why is the decimal in the wrong spot for this pole position?
Rider of the generation. It's fine. By the way, for the Valentino Rossi Ultras Listen podcast, yes, this is our 45-minute Marc Marquez glazing session.
Make no apologies. They know what they signed up for.
Yeah, they knew that on the door coming in. And look, if there's one take to take away from Ducati's factory team testing, Marc Marquez is fucking quick.
I could have told you that for free. How quick was he?
Well, on the final day of the test in Buriram, he laid down a race simulation that was 7 tenths quicker than the field.
Wee.
Allegedly, he was going roughly the same pace that Jorge Martin won the sprint with in the subsequent Thai Grand Prix from last October.
So you're
this
saying
is a problem.
Serious.
I spoke to my man at the race, Val Koronevsky, about this. Great rider, does F1, does MotoGP, good all round
Always
dude.
enjoy his content.
Great rider, one of my favorites. Said straight up, quote, you'd be an idiot if you gave Marquez less than a 45% chance to win the championship.
Yeah.
And I can't disagree with him.
I think he's lowballing it there. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you can see it in the body language where last year, even through months into the season, Mark was quick on the Grazzini, but he was always a little bit within himself. Not always in terms of throwing the bike up the road, which was a problem last year for Mark. He can't be doing that this year if he wants a championship. This year, he was making this test. He was making shapes on the bike, and the bike was working with him. And that is as scary a sight as you can possibly see in all of two-wheel Grand Prix racing. Seems like they generally agree on the development direction of the bike.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's really all there. So what are we going to say that hasn't already been said? There are those within the garage that expect a 2019 degree of bloodbath, and I have a hard time disagreeing.
So how how in this equation does Francesco Bagnaia avoid being what Juan Pablo Montoya was at McLaren opposite Kimi Raikkonen?
I can tell you.
Yeah, I don't have the answers to that. He may have the answers to that. Because the problem with Pecco is that he is... Pecco Bagnaia, why are you the way that you are, will never carry more weight than it will this year. Because he is the most extraordinary rider you've ever seen, right up until the point where he crashes for no apparent reason. And he kept letting people in. Last year, he let Martin in enough that he finally got to get punished for it. Marc Marquez is going to punish you much, much harder if you do that.
And the thing is, like, Marc Marquez is a sketchy qualifier on this Ducati so far. He's been erratic on over a single lap, but his race pace is so incredibly bludgeoningly fast. He was the only man on a 23 that was giving Martin and Bagnaia a headache multiple times over this season in terms of race pace. Marquez has become a phenomenal race manager. And he has been the star of this offseason. There's no doubt about it. He has looked quick in every capacity. And as Cam has said, he looks far more comfortable on the bike. And this is the problem with Bagnaia. If you're being ultra critical of Francesco Bagnaia as rider, and we are because he is that good, if you're being ultra critical of Bagnaia, the problem with him is that he's won championships. He's not dominated championships. He won his two by the skin of their respective teeth. And last year, he had an 11 Grand Prix win season, but lost out due to poor form in sprints. Like, this is a man who has always been vulnerable, always punishable. For all the quality he possesses as a rider, there have been moments where he's looked shaky. and that has been the biggest issue with Bagnaia, was that he will make mistakes. He will leave the door open for you to punish him. And you're not facing Jorge Martin. And there's no disrespect to Jorge Martin. Marc Marquez is another level of rider entirely. He's the guy that everybody knows is the best rider in the world today. He's the guy that has the assurances, has the benefit of the doubt, has the wages, because we know that Marc Marquez can dominate and destroy people to win championships. Bagnaia has not earned that reputation yet. For all his success, for his tremendous career that he's had, he is not 93. And yeah, that is why I think so many people have Marquez as the favorite for this championship, and it's hard to blame them.
Yeah.
So, with all that in mind, here's some predictions. Because we do this everywhere with MotoGP. So, I've kept this one relatively because there's not an awful lot to play with here. So, I'll go, who finishes third in the championship? Because I'm assuming that Bagnaia and Marquez will be your main title fight. So, who wins best of the rest?
Why not Bez?
I'm going to say Alex Marquez.
I'm going to say Alex Marquez.
I think he's looked very quick, and I think he's been the most comfortable on the GP24s I've seen so far. I think it's the year Alex Marquez finally puts it all together. Probably wins a sprint or two.
Could win a race. I think that by having been given the platform, there is a realistic shot of any of the Ducati riders to snag a win.
Sure. I could see it. I could definitely see it. Who ends up as second best factory?
In current form, I gotta say Aprilia. I'm double dipping my Aprilia glazing here.
I'm going to ignore that. I would also go with Aprilia. I think once Martin gets back, I think he will acclimate, and he's Jorge Martin. He is devastatingly fast at his best. And I think Bez has looked good enough.
Yeah.
I think there'll be a distant second factory, but I do think there'll be the second factory.
RJ was out here in the background accidentally double dipping his glaze on the apple fritters from regular show. I am also going to say Aprilia. It's a clean sweep here. I think that like I said, Bez gave me a lot of reassurance about Aprilia. I was not sure about them with Martin injured, but Bez has looked very solid in testing all the way through, was excellent to go around, was quicker than any Aprilia has ever been. If Bez is quick and has got his confidence back, Aprilia will be fine. Yeah. So I'm going to say they'll be second.
We all pick Aprilia. Now, save this for later when KTM inevitably surges to second in the championship with the strength of their new majority owner, Sir Jim Ratcliffe.
Get the fuck out.
That is the most offensive statement ever uttered on this show, O'Connell.
How fucking dare you? I feel like Captain Holt right now. RJ O'Connell, I am your superior podcast host. Bone!
You rackle.
Who, before I lose my head in anger? Okay. Over or under 5.5 different winners?
Give me over.
Say under. Go up 5.
Marquez, Bagnaia.
Other Marquez.
I think maybe Alex Marquez steals one. Maybe Jorge Martin can nab one on an Aprilia if he's really feeling it. We've seen it before. Aprilia on a good day can snag wins. I'm going to say just under. I think maybe 4 or 5.
That's where I'm sitting.
Thinking both the factory Ducatis. I'm thinking Digi. I'm thinking Alex Marquez. I'm thinking Pedro Acosta and Jorge Martin and Marco Bezzecchi.
Acosta win? You think Acosta wins a Grand Prix this year?
I think so.
Okay. I can see it. Okay. Over or under 20.5 Ducati wins?
Give me the over.
I've inherently got to go under to be consistent with my last choice.
Yeah, because I was like, how high do I set this bar to make people think about? 22. You can have one for free. You have one joker here.
Over.
I was like, I can't go, will Ducati run the table because all it takes is one bad day. I said, you can have one joker. You can have one for free, 20.5. I'm going to say over. I think maybe Aprilia steals one. Maybe Acosta steals one on a particularly good day. But I think Ducati will win at least 21 Grand Prix. They will beat their record from last year from 19. And finally, of course, your world champion will be... Don't all rush in at once, gentlemen.
Oh, I'm waiting for y'all.
93, Marc Marquez.
93. I've been predicting it for years, and damn it, I need to be right this time, or I will.
And not only that, it would also mean Marc Marquez would tie Valentino Rossi for 7 Premier Class World titles.
Now, my heart...
in a certain sense, it just means more.
My heart wants this. I want to see Marc Marquez reach the mountaintop. But for the purpose of podcast competition, I'm going Francesco Bagnaia.
Then to be fair,
Jay O'Connell, what have you done?
I am the kind of sicko that bets against his own favorite sports team, which I would never do in real life.
You really are a sicko. What I would say is that there is every chance Bagnaia could do it. Like, he is more than good enough for a bike rider to be able. This is not a crazy selection by any stretch of the imagination. But
I got his work cut out for him.
And hey, if it makes you feel any better, the only one of the three of us on this show last year who predicted the world champion correctly was Mr. RJ O'Connell, because he picked Jorge Martin. So, hey, who knows? You might get it right 2 years in a row, because if I can pick 2 Daytona winners in a row and 2 Le Mans winners in a row, there's hope for everybody. Take that, sports car crowd.
It's me, I'm the sports car crowd.
You like sports car racing now, don't you, Dre?
No, I just like picking winners. Speaking of which, hey, the Qatar 1812 kilometer is this weekend as well. The World Endurance Championship starts its campaign literally as you're listening to this episode. So you can listen to that and enjoy that. I will also next week have full reviews of MotoGP's opening round of the season in Buriram, Thailand. I can't wait to see how that plays out in real time, because, hey, even if you're not sure about the bikes, it's Buriram, fantastic track. Great choice for a season opener.
It would be so good being so simple layout and so flat, but yeah.
No, it works.
It works. It's a great fucking track. Looking forward to that. IndyCar gets its season underway this weekend as well. Its debut on Fox and the Street of St. Petersburg. Do watch that as well. Who will take the opener on that one? That's going to be a fascinating race as a litmus test to see where IndyCar is at as well. So a whole loaded weekend of motorsport coming up. We are really into the business end of it now, Mr. Krabs. But until then, I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Cameron Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara.
Later, y'all.
Ducati to run the table, question mark?
I'll give you 4-1 odds.